Here's Tucket's Home by Gary Paulson, and we're just beginning it, so check out the really cool map that shows Tucket's travels, or part of his travels, from Independence all the way up into Oregon over here. So that's the trail, and notice the years, 1847 to 1849. That kind of helps you to figure out when this all happened, or when as Gary Paulson was picturing it as happening. Here's chapter 1. Francis Tucket lay quietly, the sun warming his back, and watched a small herd of buffalo below him in a depression on the prairie. There were only 15 or 20 of them, mostly cows with some yearling calves. Two young bulls were sparring, tearing up the dirt and raising dust in great clouds. He turned to look behind him, where a 10-year-old Lottie watched their horses graze. Her little brother Billy crouched beside her, making an arrow. Francis looked down at the buffalo. The sun was gently on his back. The dust from the fight was drifting away on a soft breeze. And as Francis lay watching, he let his mind wander back over the trip since he and Lottie and Billy had left the Pueblo Indian village. He'd stayed there a month so that Francis could recover from a snake bite. With the help of some of the Indians, Lottie had pulled him through, while Billy had learned to hunt and shoot a bow and arrow with amazing skill. The village had been a peaceful place. Now Francis shifted and scanned the horizon. Even in a quiet moment like this one, you had to be alert, ready for anything. They had all learned that the hard way. Francis Tucket had been separated from his family more than a year before, on his 14th birthday, when Pawnees kidnapped him from a wagon train. Jason Grimes, a one-armed mountain man, had helped him escape and taught him to survive. After they parted, Francis had found Lottie and Billy alone on the prairie, their father dead of cholera. They'd been members of a wagon train that abandoned them when their father became sick, so for fear that he would infect others in the train. So the three had stuck together and headed west to the Oregon Trail to find Francis's family. Lottie had proved to be the best organizer and camper Francis had ever seen, and Billy, now just shy of 8, had become a hunting and scouting machine for the First Order. They'd been through some hair-raising adventures, kidnapped by the Comanchero outlaw band, storms, snakebite, ambushed by the murderous thieves Cortweiler and Dubs. The three had shared plenty, good and bad, and now they shared a secret: the ancient Spanish silver and gold they carried on the pack horse. When they were being chased by the Comancheros, Billy had stumbled upon the grave of a Spanish conquistador buried in his armor, sword, and plunder of centuries ago. Of course, gold and silver meant nothing out here in the wilderness. But someday, they'd find Francis's family and civilization, though they still had 500 miles of rough country to cover alone. Francis had feared there would be problems on this part of their journey, but it had turned out to be nothing more than a camping trip in a country so beautiful that Francis often had trouble believing it was real. They had started in partial desert, country covered in mesquite and pinyons, but it quickly gave way to mountains. Spring had come early and had stayed. Thick green grass kept the horses well fed and happy. Streams ran full of cold water and trout. Billy caught the fish easily, using the skill he'd learned from the Pueblos that carried only a bit of line braided from horsehair, taken from the ponies' tails, and a bent and sharpened piece of wire. Francis had no trouble getting deer with his rifle, and Billy supplemented the venison and trout diet with rabbit and turkey and grouse he shot with his bow. Within a week, they were all getting fat, and the pack horse nearly staggered with extra meat as they rode through the grassy mountain meadows amid high mountain peaks still covered with snow. But they hadn't seen any buffalo until they'd come to this rise and seen below them the small herd with the fighting bulls. "Honestly, Francis, I don't see why we need more meat," Lottie had crawled up alongside him. Billy, his arrow finish, was 100 yards back below the ridge, adjusting the makeshift packs on the horses. "We have so much now, we can't carry it all." "Not so loud. If the wind shifts, they'll hear us and run," Francis whispered. "The reason is that we don't have buffalo meat. Besides that, they're fat, and we need the grease for our moccasins and rifles, and leather, and my rifle, so we're going to shoot a buffalo, all right?" She nodded and became quiet, and he studied the terrain around the herd to see how best to approach them for a shot. The buffalo were in a small basin with a series of drainage gullies that fed in and out. Francis saw that the one that ran off to the east seemed to provide the best course. It was deep and wound back toward him in a big loop with a smaller ditch he could use for access. He nodded and pointed with his chin. "See that ditch off to the right? He looked at Lottie, then back. You go back with Billy. I'll make my way down there. And suddenly, as if by magic, there was a burst of gray smoke below them from the edge of the gully that pointed toward the buffalo. Half an instant later, Francis heard the crack of a rifle. They were so far away it took that long for the sound to reach them, and one of the cows, watching the fighting bulls, pitched forward and down into her side. What? There was another puff of smoke. Another cow went down, then another shot, and another, coming so fast. They were almost on top of each other, and each time a cow would drop on her side and start kicking in death. 12 shots, 12 cows. Francis, somebody's shooting our buffalo. Lottie punched his shoulder. Stay down. Francis watched the basin below. The buffalo had not run out, but were moving in confused circles. Quiet, be quiet. Now let's see what's going on. 12 shots in perhaps 20 seconds. No man on earth could load and fire a muzzle-loading rifle 36 times a minute. There had to be more than one man hiding in the gully. Francis looked to the rear and waved to Billy, who had heard the shooting, to stay where he was with the horses. There, Lottie whispered. There they are. Francis couldn't believe his eyes. A tall, thin man in a full, dark suit came out of the gully, followed by 3 other men in tan suits, all wearing strange-looking round helmets. The man in the dark suit carried nothing, but the other 3 had 2 rifles each and were festooned with powder horns and belts and ramrods. Why, Francis, he's a fancy man, Lottie snorted. What's a fancy man doing out here? Killing buffalo, the way it looks. Francis studied them a moment, wondered if there was danger there, decided there could not be, and shrugged. They seem harmless. Let's go down and see why they needed to shoot a dozen buffalo. Well, there you go. That was the first chapter of Tucket's Home. Remember the trip, where they're going, so I'll show you the map one more time. Here it is. It started here. Of course, they went down here at some point, and then they're back up here, moving along this way. And there we go. More later. Bye.